So now we are listening to cello music, and it's a living stereo recording, and Antonio Janigro is playing the cello with the soloist in Zagreb. They are fantastic musicians. I really love all of their recordings. And right now we are listening to a Boccherini B-flat cello concerto, and we will have Vivaldi following this, and then Bach as well. So this is really a fantastic recording, and I will show it. Maybe you can see on the edge that most of it is missing, and we live in Hawaii, so probably cockroaches ate it, so that's why it's missing. But it doesn't mean that this is a crap recording, even though it was maybe like picked up for like 50 cents or something like that at one of the used record stores. But guess what, it's a first pressing, so that's how real record collectors are. You can find gems and treasures at basically anywhere. You just go to your used record store and just find treasures. You don't have to get stuck online and look up eBay. Oh, there's a first pressing coming up for $500. I grab that. You can grab it for 50 cents, but you need to be lucky. Most of the copies that you find at the used record stores, they will be pretty late pressings, banged up, scratched up, whatnot. But from time to time you'll get lucky, and if you collect records for a long while throughout the years, you will find tons of treasures. So that's part of the appeal. So anyway, this video today is because even though this is such a fantastic treasure, the recording is out of phase. So I had to flip the phase switch on my amp so that we can listen to it now in the correct phase. And I think most of you will say like, what? Phase? What's going on? So actually, I hate to enlighten people, but phase is a critical aspect of sound. It's just as critical as the frequency descriptions, frequency measurements. So saying that a speaker can go from 20 Hz to 20 kHz, it's one aspect of how a speaker performs, but the other aspect is phase. So it's kind of like the flip side of a coin, and most of the attention is only at the frequency response, but the phase has been really neglected, and people really don't know much about phase. And everyone can hear phase, but very few people are trained enough and know enough to make it consciously, to recognize consciously what's wrong with the sound if it's not in correct phase, or parts of the sound are not in correct phase. And this video is about teaching you about how to recognize phase and what's really going on. So basically, as I said, phase is really an essential characteristic of sound, and when the sound is in phase, it means the sound is coming to you, and when it's played back out of phase, then it means that the sound is sucked out. So it's not coming from the speakers to you, but it's going sucked out into the speakers. So it's kind of like standing at the ocean, and instead of the waves coming towards you, they go from you into the back of the ocean to the horizon. So this is what the effect is. So when the sound is in phase, then you can see and hear all of the sound like coming from the instrument right here and traveling into your eardrum. So basically the sound pressure comes from the violin and hits your eardrum and pushes it inwards. And that's correct. That's that's what you hear in real life. And when the sound is out of phase, then it means that your eardrum is sucked out, and that does not happen naturally. The only time it happens naturally is when you travel on an airplane and the airplane takes off. And as you go up, the air pressure drops and your eardrum starts to come out, and that's when you have some earache until your ear pops and the pressure equilibrates within your skull and the outer space. And when the pain descends, then you go through the pains again. So this is what happens when we have a nice speaker here. This is our driver, and it creates a sound. And the sound wave is created by the driver moving out. So the cone moves out towards you, and that generates a pressure wave. Like right here, the pressure is rising, and after a while, when the cone reaches the maximum, then the cone starts to go back. And this is the phase when the cone starts to go back. And at one point it hits where the cone was originally at 0, so that's the crossover point, the 0 point, and then it starts to suck air in. And then it goes back the furthest. And then it starts to come forward again, until it hits the 0 point. It goes through the 0 point and goes against to the next max. And it does this again and again and again. And the going in and out, that's defined by the lowest frequency. And you see these spikes there, like there, and that spike, and that little hump there. Those are frequencies which are higher frequency than the lowest frequency generated by that driver. So basically in real music we never have sine waves, the things that we measure for amplifier measurements, but we have these complex patterns that waves riding upon waves and creating music. So let's have a test here. This is our scenario. We have a driver, and the driver starts to create a sound. So there's a pressure rising, and then it drops, and then it rises again, and it drops. So is this in phase or out of phase? Now you can make your choice. It's in phase, yay! Because the driver started to go out, right? And then the pressure is pushing your eardrums in. So when you want to test whether your speakers are in phase or not, then play some music. And if you have a nice big woofer like that, then put your hand against the woofer. And if you feel a little pressure when you play the music loud, then it's in correct phase. If it's out of phase, then you do not feel a pressure because the driver goes in first, so it sucks in your hand. But when it's in correct phase, it pushes the air against your hand, and you can feel it as the air getting compressed there. So let's look at what phase correctness means. So and not just phase correctness, we have looked at phase correctness right now. So it means that the pressure starts when the pressure started with the real event. So we have the same pressure change when we listen to the stereo at home. However, the problem is that not every frequency is played back at the same phase as it was recorded. So even if your system is phase correct, unless you have a single driver speaker, there will be little differences in the phase. And let's look at why that happens, and that's called phase coherency. So basically we have a coherent phase only when we have a single driver speaker. So it means that all of the frequencies are provided by the same moving surface, so they move together. So it means that the start of the pressure is the same for all of the frequencies. So this way the phase response is uncompromised. However, the problem is that frequency extension is compromised because we only have a single driver, and it's really tough call to make them work for the entire frequency range. So that's why they put these visor cones. So there are these extra paper cones in these drivers, like for example as this Zenith full range driver, and they put these tiny cones inside because they can couple to the air at high frequencies. When you have the big cone surface, you see the woofer here, which is the main cone. So this one is more capable to generate the air pressure at mid to lower frequencies, but at high frequencies it doesn't do a good job because its diameter is much bigger than the diameter of the sound wave that it's trying to create. And when you have that problem, that the surface is much bigger than the sound wave, then you are going to mess it up. It's not going to come out clear. It's not going to happen. So that's why they put these visor cones in the center to create those high frequencies. But even in this scenario, the bass response is still compromised, because from a single driver we can make it go down to, let's say, like 40 Hz, 30 Hz, but if you want to make it go down to 20 Hz or lower, then you need to do something about that. Oh, and by the way, you can make single drivers work down to surprisingly deep levels, and the secret of that is you need a big enough cabinet. Because usually people put them in two small cabinets and then the frequency extension is maybe down to 50 Hz or so. If you add the port, maybe you can lower it a few more hertzes, like maybe down to 40, but that's it, you cannot go lower. However, if you have a big enough cabinet, like 6 cubic feet or bigger, then you can make even single driver speakers work down to 30 Hz or even a little bit lower. But what people nowadays want to do and what they think to do is how to fix the problem that my single driver doesn't have enough bass. Add the subwoofer. Yay! What does that do? Okay, so now we fix the frequency extension with a nice rel sub. However, we ruin everything that the single driver speaker gives us, which is we have now compromised phase and phase anomalies for the bass. And why does that happen? It happens because we have two different assemblies making the movement. So here we have these cones, the visor cone and the main cone and the magnet structure, and also here we have that's the surround that couples the cone to the basket, and beneath we have the spider that secures the base of the cone to the basket. So that gives a specific inductance and a specific tension to the driver. So it has a different specific mass and inertia. And that inertia and mass is very different when you go for different size woofers, different cone materials, and different strength of suspension. So because of these differences, they will not start in the same phase. And also we need to use crossovers. And crossovers alter the phase even more. They really do a big trip. And the higher order a crossover is, the more effect it has on phase. So that's a problem with crossovers. So crossovers are good and bad. They are really good if you want like a really steep order crossover. Then you can really mix and match different drivers at really precise levels, and then have them cut so that the frequencies like drops, and you have a perfect level. But if you drop them like let's say at the fourth order, or now with electronic crossovers you can have infinite slope crossovers, it's not clear, because the good thing that it does cut the frequency, but crossovers mess up phase. Guys, wake up! Everyone, please wake up! Crossovers do two things, not just frequency but phase. And no one is talking about phase and what kind of gigantic mass crossovers create for phase. So that's why when you use heavy order crossovers, then you can have very impressive sound, you can achieve very high sound levels with that approach, but it's going to be very artificial. And people do not notice it nowadays because everyone is used to listening to MP3s, listening to your cell phones, listening to amplified events, and generations now grew up with our ears now calibrated to these gadgets, to these gizmos, to artificial sound. There's hardly any people among us whose ears are calibrated to natural instruments, to human voice, and if you want realistic, naturalistic, natural reproduction of vocals and instruments, then you need a very low slope crossover, a very benign one, maybe a first order, or let your full range driver run all over its spectrum, and maybe add the tweeter or add the woofer to it to supplement, and then cut only the woofer. So add the high pass filter for the woofer and let the full range driver run without any crossovers, and then you will have the least processing and processing into the sound, and then you will have the most natural results. So here this slide shows that if we start two sound waves, let's say this driver starts a 1 kHz wave and the woofer starts a 30 Hz wave, and when the amplifier tells them you start them together now, in real life they do not start together because there is the crossover on the subwoofer, and the crossover changes the phase of all the frequencies, and how it changes exactly, we are going to that later, but that's a very long subject. But for right now, it's enough to know that that it changes the start time, the phase, quite a bit. And in real life, this is the same effect as if the musicians are a little bit tipsy and they do not start at the same time. So the bass section just is not right on time. Like the drummer has some some booze inside. So when you look into phase and you read about phase, the phase goes from 0 to 360 degrees, and if it's the phase error is 0 degrees or 360 degrees, then it's in phase, because 360 goes through a whole cycle, so you get back to 0. And when you read about it, 1 to 30 degree error, it's very small, it's very hardly noticeable to the ear. 90 degree error is super noticeable, and 180 degrees is out of phase. So this is the unnatural sound. And you want to avoid that just as much as you want to avoid a speaker that doesn't go down to 20 Hz, right? And if you go to a high number, let's say 300 degrees, we are already getting close to 360 degrees, which is 0, so it is not as bad. It's a quite benign error compared to the 180. So the phase doesn't work like linear numbers, that the higher the number, the worse the problem is. 180, that's the bad problem, and when you go closer to 360 or 0, that's when things get better. So now let's look at proper speaker design. So here I have a Ryan speaker, which is the Ryan 610. That's the smallest Ryan speaker, but you can look at the other Ryans. All of them are phase correct. So this means that all of their drivers, in this case you have the tweeter and you have the woofer, or I would say the mid-range slash woofer cone, they work together. So when the amp yells them, guys, move out, then both of them move out together, or like this way, tweeter, woofer. They move out and come back. So they start the show at the same time. However, because here this is like a smaller speaker, you want to add a subwoofer to it. If you want to play it in a big room and you want to go it down to 20 Hertz, but then just take care that you add the sub in the same phase. So then all three drivers, when the music starts, they boom, start to go out same time, and you have a nice experience. If you add the woofer out of phase, so it moves in, meanwhile the upper two goes out, then that will suck out quite a bit of the impact. So if you don't have enough impact from your subwoofer, then probably it's out of phase. So if your sub has a phase switch, then flip it, and if you now have impact and punchy bass, then now it's in phase. If you flip it again and it goes out, so you do not have impact anymore, then it's now out of phase. So that's really easy to tell for the sub if it's not in phase. And now we have another situation here. We just look at an unnamed speaker, and actually most of the audiophile speakers behave like this, is that when the amp says, guys, move out, time to start the show, then the tweeter behaves, does good job, and woofer behaves, does a good job, but the mid-range goes the other way. And that's really bad scenario, because as you see, it's really messed up. So this truly messes up the sound and makes it unnatural. So why do we have speakers that are built like this? Isn't it engineering 101 to put in all your drivers in correct polarity, in correct phase? Yes, this is engineering 101, and everyone who designs and sells speakers should know that they should put in their drivers in correct phase. Otherwise, they are toying with the sound. However, it has become a common practice that speaker manufacturers mess up their speakers, because when you do that, when you inverse the phase of one of your drivers, then it's easier to create a frequency response curve, which is something like this, which is more flat, right? So and that's because it's really hard to make speakers. So when you design speakers, it's really hard to get your woofer, your mid-range and your tweeter to work together, because they play at different levels, they have different frequency extensions, and then you have to put crossovers on them to make the ends meet, and when crossovers meet, then it's really hard to get them average out. So what people do is that they flip the drivers in phase, out of phase, and toying with that, they can generate a nice frequency response curve like the one here, nice flat one, and they can send it to stereophile, and they get a great review. And no one cares that the sound is shitty. Pardon me for my French, but that's what happens. If you flip one of your drivers, you are creating artificial sound. It's not real anymore. You are skewing it big time. And actually, why can people get away with it? I hope that's on my next slide. Yes, it is. Because when you invert one of your drivers, it creates a stunning sound. It creates an acoustic illusion. Because right here, when we have our mid-range out of phase, this will de-emphasize mid-range. And it will emphasize, maybe I check a different color. So in that case, if mid-range is out of phase, then your highs and your lows will pop out. So your speakers will sound as if their top end is better and their bass is better than a competitor who has everything in correct phase. And this is the scenario when you start to hear things that I never heard this in my recording, that Diana Cross smacks her lips. Of course you never heard it in your recording, because when it's recorded in correct phase, that smacking sound is covered by other mid-range sounds that are present here. But when your mid-range is messed up big time, then you can hear those sounds which you cannot normally hear, because your brain, your brain is focused on the mid-range. So normally our brains hone into the mid-range. So 90% of our attention is on the mid-range driver. And that's why speakers manufacturers are so keen on wanting to place more attention on the tweeter and on the woofer, because that will make it sound special and people will want to buy the product. However, so our brains, we are not trained to recognize these phase errors, so people have no idea what it is. They are very happy at first that, yay, big check mark, we have excellent high frequency extension, seemingly more than normal, because our brains are tricked, because we hear more top end because of the lack of the mid-range clarity, and we artificially hear more of the bass. However, after a while, after you live with this speaker for a year or two, your brain instinctively figures it out that you've been tricked. And if you change it for another speaker, then another and another, and you are going through speakers because your brain is not satisfied anymore. And this is the #1 reason for audiophile burnout, because we are buying speakers with incorrect phase drivers. They are messed up, but they do sell, because when you have incorrect phase drivers, they are more stunning at first listening. So if you have a demo with these, they will be like, wow, stunners, but you cannot live with them. And then you want to buy another speaker to upgrade, and you think that the upgrade will be to get a more expensive speaker, and that will fix the issue. You get a more expensive speaker with the same issues as we see here, and you will be happy with it because it's better than the old one. It has higher resolution, better dynamics, better frequency extension, but your brain will figure it out after a while that I am duped. So you want something more, and basically the vast majority of the speakers on the market has these phase issues. So that's why you will eventually burn out, and most people never reach audio heaven because of this phase issue. And while everyone is really keen on frequency extension, and yes, frequency extension is important, but if you do not have correct phase going with frequency extension, it's like having a coin, but you have only one side of the coin and the other side of the coin is missing. You need both sides of the coin to have a satisfactory speaker. And now let's close our session. I see that, or I hear that our cello concerto evening has come to an end. So now let's I will give you a sneak preview for the next episode, which will be really a bomb, a big explosion. And let's just read something. While the crowd goofed off, one player changed the game. And I call it the crowd goofed off because the majority of the speaker, of the high-end speaker companies, I'm not talking about junk speakers that you put in your kitchen or whatnot, or buy for $20 at Best Buy. But I'm talking about the high-end and the cream of high-end. They all, I would not say not all, but because there are companies, for example, there's like Ryan Acoustics, and there's also Vandersteen, who have consistently been making phase correct speakers. But apart from these very few companies, the majority of the speaker manufacturers just goofed off, because they sometimes out of ignorance they flip the phase on a driver, but most often they flip the phase to appease the media, to have better advertisement for the speakers, because everyone is so focused on that stupid frequency response curve that that the speakers manufacturers were really forced to play this game, and that game created this boutique audiophile sound. And while the crowd goofed off and were just scrambling to produce acceptable frequency response curves, one player emerged in the high-end audio arena that changed the entire industry and gave high-end audio its face, its character, and what people consider as the highest expression of sound, and the greatest, the most coveted status. And I'm using here Star Wars analogy, and in the Star Wars universe there are people who know how the universe works, and they are described as the Force users, and they are the Jedi Knights, and they are the Sith. So the Jedi and the Sith know how to use Force. This corresponds in audio to companies who make audio. And I would say even within those companies, the cream of the companies. And those who are the Sith, they are the ones who really know how to use measurements, how to push frequency extremes, how to push volume levels, like to create the loudest, most precise sound, most controlled sound. So everything, every detail controlled to the greatest measure, nothing left to chance, nothing left to stray resonances in the cabinet. Everything has to be scientifically described, scientifically accurate, measured and proven. And they are using the newest technology, new ideas, new materials, new methods, cost no object, and this is something which is at the forefront of audio science today. So they are using the highest next technology, basically like going into space technology and all sorts of leading techs that you cannot buy on usually on the market or from most speaker manufacturers, but it's really like keeping one step above and beyond. And the Jedi way, that's using your existing technology. So we are not creating junk heaps by abandoning what we have developed already, but we take it and perfect it. So it's like a violin maker. We have the violin already. We do not have to reinvent it, like creating a carbon fiber monstrosity, but we use the violin body and we make it better. That's how like Stradivarius worked and perfected it. So that's how our modern audio Jedi Knights work, that they take a speaker cabinet which uses an existing technology, and they perfect it and perfect it step by step. And the end product looks like a usual general speaker, nothing special about it, but it will sound amazing. And when you go to the Sith method, then they take something radically new that wasn't before and show that works, and it works better than anything before. So our next episode will be basically showing you these two extremes in speakers manufacturing, and I will teach how to read the frequency response curve and to tell what that means. And I will illustrate this with two audio companies, Wilson Audio and Audionaut. And one last thing is that when I mention like the Sith and the Jedi, this is to show the attitude towards engineering, and there's no morality in it, so there's no good and evil guys. The way Jedi and Sith looks at themselves, they don't see themselves as good or bad, they all see themselves as force users, and that's how I want to portray all the audio companies here. So there are no good guys, no bad guys, just two very different approaches. One of them is to create new technologies and make that work, and the other one is to use what we have and perfect it. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you liked it, like it please, so that others can watch it. If you do not like my videos, then YouTube will not show this video, so they will stay in anonymity and no one will ever watch them, and I just move my mouth without any use, just waste everyone's time. If you like it, then people will see it, but if you don't like it, then don't. So no worries about that. But if you like it, then please hit the like button. Otherwise, yes. So now it's tea time, and thank you so much for joining in.